My name is Stephanie Patel. I was born in 1950. I'm 74 years old this year, and I hear voices very clearly. Um, I have debated making this video. I wanted to talk to people because I thought it might help some people who are currently having to labor under a diagnosis of schizophrenia or just something else that is very causing them a lot of disturbance in their lives. Because whether or not you are considered mentally ill, if you hear voices, is not so much a matter of whether you hear voices, but what you hear. And I want to talk about that, why some people hear things that are very, very disturbing to them, and others are very comfortable with it. And so you may find that you are either labeled as schizophrenic or you are labeled a medium, depending upon what you hear. And so I'd like to talk to you about that. But as I thought about it, I thought about how very, very difficult it is to explain something that you really have to experience. It's like the color red. You can't explain the color red to someone, it's something you have to experience. It's kind of like you have to experience the ocean. You can't really understand it just from somebody describing it to you. It's a little easier now that we have videos and pictures and stuff, but still, when someone comes and describes what it's like to stand there against the immensity of the ocean, it's a little hard to really comprehend it unless you actually can do that yourself. So, experience is the great teacher. And a lot of you, some of you who may be listening to this, hear voices. And you are told that they are imaginary. They may frighten you because they may say things to you that you find very disturbing. It may cause you to be on medication. It may cause you to go through an entire lifetime feeling like there's something wrong with you. You're broken. Because that's the way the medical profession deals with it these days, because they trust on nothing, you see. They don't understand what it is because they don't understand themselves. They do not understand that the very professionals diagnosing you hear voices. They talk to them in their head all the time. And they just call it an inner dialogue or something like that. They may have conversations with their old teachers, their parents, the boss, their patients, whatever, in their head. They're having conversations that are imaginary. Those people who hear voices are having actual conversations that are experiential and not just some kind of lingering, what could I call it? A lingering energy that afflicts people. So most of the people that consider themselves sane hear voices and they talk to them in their head and they consider themselves sane. And so, really, the medical profession has not advanced much in this regards from the Middle Ages, when if you heard voices, you were told that it was the devil talking to you and you were possessed by the devil. So I hope some of you may be able to get something out of what I say here. First of all, I'm going to tell you that I come from a family where many people have been diagnosed with schizophrenia. I had an aunt that was diagnosed with it. I don't know much about her life, but I had a sister who suffered terribly from the time she was about 19 until she died at the age of 76. She was hospitalized over and over and over again, and it was a miserable experience for her. I had a nephew who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he died, I think, at the age, he was the golden boy. I mean, everything went right for him. Good looking, great student, great ball player, just destined for great things in life. And I think he was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was about 19. and he died when he was 27. And that's quite a story of what happened. But he had 8 years of misery until he was allowed to go home. Now, when I say go home, you have to understand that the foundation in which I work, the structure of the world in which I work is very, very vast and it accommodates logic. It's very, very logical and sensible. It is very accessible to those people who use logic. It's it all fits together. It's like putting a puzzle together and it all fits together. But most people can't put the puzzle together and they don't even believe it's possible or they don't even want to because they refuse. They absolutely refuse to consider a very important aspect of reality. And that's why it's so difficult to talk to people about this because a lot of people that are diagnosed with schizophrenia also have been trained to disregard a very important aspect of reality. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. Take a short break here because I have something in the oven and I'll be right back. That break was longer than I wanted it to be because I didn't record. I didn't hit the record button. And so I talked for 20 minutes and it didn't record. And then life intervened, but I am back. And so I want to first say that it is common for little children to speak to what people call their imaginary friends, but they're not imaginary at all. They exist. And I'll tell you a little story that my good friend from childhood told me not so long ago. She told me that her little granddaughter, who was maybe 3 years old at the time, she heard her singing this song that my friend's mother used to sing. And she had never taught her granddaughter that song. And she asked her daughter if she had ever sung it to her. And her granddaughter, or her own daughter, said no, the mother of the granddaughter. And she asked her granddaughter, she said, "Where did you hear that song?" And she said, "Well, my grandma told me this." And she said, "You mean me?" She said, "No, my other grandma taught me, and your mother." And she said, "You was your mother." And my friend was amazed, of course, but she was very open. From I always knew that she was very open. So that was a confirmation for her. When I was 3 years old, I wandered away in the wilderness and I basically froze to death. Uh, well, basically, or whatever, however you want to say it. Apparently, I asphyxiated actually on some frozen algae, but froze because it was Alaska in the winter in the wilderness. And I um, went to heaven and came back and told my mother, and she freaked out because my mother was very, very Catholic. And she was raised that you can't go to heaven and come back. Only Jesus could do that. And that anybody who said that it was blasphemy or else it was something else. So she wasn't quite sure. I don't think if the devil had me or if I was like my dad's sister, schizophrenic. Either way, she wasn't having anything to do with it. So she told me I must never do that again and even punished me a little bit when I complained that my friends would be unhappy if I didn't talk to them. And so eventually I learned, she told my siblings too, not to listen to me, that I was not telling the truth. And eventually I just gave up. And so I didn't really have this experience of talking to people in spirit, although I had many experiences. That wasn't one of them. While I was growing up, I had another near death experience when I was 20 because I'd had a very unhappy life and I actually took an overdose of pills and ended up in the hospital. I think I coded while I was there. Um, and they, uh, I didn't really talk about it afterwards because I was so freaked out. Because, well, when things happen to you when you're a small child and you're told not to talk about things, you're lying, etc. Nobody will love you if you talk about it. You, it stays deep in your psyche, let's say. and and so I just kept it to myself. I couldn't tell anybody anyway. They would have pounced all over me, and I knew that. And so it was at least 10 years, maybe longer, before I dared talk about it. And I had other experiences along the way. And I even dabbled in some mediumship when I was, about 30 years ago. So, but not for long. It was just something I would do with unknown people that I would meet on the internet, and I would tell them things and whatever. And it wasn't until I retired, and so I retired when I was about 65, and my mother died about that time. And it was after that that, uh, how shall I explain this? Someone came to me, a couple of people actually. One showed up, and I saw him early in the morning, and these are people who weren't alive as we think of being alive. And another started talking to me and wouldn't leave me alone. And many, many, many validations, so many validations, little things that would happen. I can't even tell you right now, and I'm not going to. So it's a little difficult at first because now I have somebody talking to me, blah, 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 blah. And not just one, but others came in too, and they were talking to me. And so it was kind of strange. And, um, I was kind of like, I can't do this. This isn't going to work. I have a family. I had at that time a lot of issues going on with my children and grandchildren, and that needed to be attended to. And so I didn't really have time. I was a bit frustrated and strained trying to take care of everybody. And I said, I can't do this. And, um, my family, my kids already think I'm a little bit strange. Um, and so I don't know if I can do this. And then this person I was talking to said to me, well, he's talking to me, and he said, would you rather be miserable and sane, or would you rather be happy and crazy? And I said, oh, I didn't even think about that when I said, I'll take crazy happy. And it was so we had lots of fun, lots of adventures, and others too. It was kind of a gay time. We would laugh, and they would amuse me actually. And it went on for a while. It was okay, but lots of adventures, there was a lots of uh, emotional ups and downs. So it was a roller coaster actually emotionally at this time because of who I was primarily connected with. Apparently, if you don't trust on reincarnation, you won't understand this, but apparently we'd had many lifetimes together, had a long history, and uh, it just got more and more intense. But a little over a year ago, after this started, I went through a period that was very, very dark and difficult, because, as I said, the difference between being happy, talking to voices, feeling good, and being mentally insane, mentally disturbed, is who you're talking to and what you're listening to. And that has a lot to do with how you see the world. That has a lot to do with whether you're fighting your shadow or you're just going with the flow, and you're willing to listen, and you're willing to see things differently than the way you're trained to see things. And a lot of people cannot escape what they're trained to see in order to embrace the bigger picture. And so you have to stuff yourself in a box. All those little kids that were talking to their imaginary friends when they're little eventually had to stuff themselves in a box to get along in society, because otherwise their mother would punish them or tell them that they were lying, or that it couldn't be possible, just laugh at them. And so and nobody else would see them and talk to them. So our society just keeps perpetuating this game where you have to stuff yourself in a box. And that's the way I feel a lot when I'm around other people. I just can't really be me. I just have to stuff myself in a box. Which is why spend a lot of time alone. And I enjoy it very much, being alone, because I have lots of hobbies and interests, and I always have. I was always pretty intellectual. So I went to college and became an attorney and practiced as an attorney for a while, started a school at some point, did lots of productive things, raised kids, mostly as a single parent, etc. I've written, I'm a writer and an artist, and when I could, I would indulge those things. Although until I retired, I really didn't have a lot of time for it. So after I retired, I'm deep in these experiences with these voices and these people that are coming and talking to me. They have identities. They are um, individuals who've had lives on Earth. Most of them, some of them were family members from my most, you know, the current life. They had passed on. My father, my mother, uh, my son came, and I went to other psychic meetings. And I got lots of validations in that way, as well as in other ways. Many, many, many. And it was all very sensible and it made sense and it was very logical. But eventually I had to deal with my shadow, my dark energy. And I was had a bit of what I'll call my darkness expressed itself as what I will call decision anxiety, where I would go. I have these family members that I'm having to deal with, and all these things that I have to decide. And I'm thinking, if I do this, then this will happen. If I do this, this will happen. So it's kind of like, what should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? And what happened is, it happened kind of gradually, but then suddenly I'm in the midst of one of the darkest periods of my entire life. And I'd had many dark periods, many challenges in life, all of which are good now because they were all learning experiences. And I understand them now. And I don't really like to talk a lot about them because I've already processed them. But anyway, at this point, I started hearing this voice that was pretty dark because it would say, if you do this, then this is going to happen. If you do this, this is going to happen. It was simple things. If you get in your car and go to the store, you're going to have an accident and you'll be maimed for life. If you don't get in the car and go to the store, then the house is going to burn down because you're going to forget to leave this and leave the stove on or something, and the house will burn down. And I say, okay, what do I do? I'm not going to stay home, not going to get in the car. And it just, if you don't get in the car and you don't go, then this is going to happen. You stand outside of your house. Um, somebody's going to come, and if this happens, they'll crucify you. If this happens, they'll hang you as a witch. If this happens, if you choose this, so and so will be harmed. On and on and on. And it was constant. It was going on and on and on. It sounds kind of funny now, but at the time, it was just so constant and so loud. This voice was so present, and I still had my friends, and they would say, "We'll help you through this, Steph. We'll help you through this." But it went on day and night, and they're giving me help and advice. But in retrospect, I understand it was the dark river that I had to cross, and we all have them. Well, I don't know if we all have them, but I have them, and I think most people I know have them. And if you hear voices and they're frightening to you, chances are you've got dark energy that's wanting to be released. So I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat for days, and it's going on and on and I couldn't get away from it, and I had nobody to tell because nobody would understand this. My family was not open, uh, and so I eventually I got to the point where I said I got to go to the hospital and get some relief here somehow. Something they have to give me something, sleeping medicine or whatever. And I didn't want to go just to a regular hospital and get something because I thought they'll just give it to me and release me, and then I'll be still in the same boat. So I decided to go to the local mental hospital, and I did. I went through an interview, and they said, "Well, you don't qualify to be admitted because you're not suicidal, and you're not articulating any desire to hurt anyone," which I wasn't. And I wasn't suicidal. It was just very, very stressed, very stressed. Um, But at the same time, I was going, oh, this is just the way it is. It's the way it is. I just have to accept that if this is the way it is, this is the way it is, because that's where my mindset was. I'd already had enough experience in the spiritual realm to just know that everything just is what it is. That's what justice means. Just is. But it was still, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was a wreck. I was a real wreck. But I did have that little bit of understanding that this is just the way it is. If I'm crazy, I'm crazy. Why fight it? So I went to them and I asked to be admitted, and they said no. And so I said, okay. And I went to the bathroom after leaving the office where I'd been interviewed, and I hear a voice that says, "What if we told you that you should hurt yourself? Hurt yourself." They just said, "What if we told you that?" And I said, "Oh, okay." So I went back and I told her, I said, "I heard a voice that said, 'What if we told you to hurt yourself?'" She said, "Oh, I think you qualify." So she admitted me, and I was there for 3 or 4 days. I think it was 3 days before I saw a doctor because it was on a weekend. And they weren't particularly nice people when they admit you. It really wasn't. But eventually they did give me some sleeping meds and it helped a little bit. But, a couple hours sleep. But in the morning, I got up and this voice is still going on and on and on. And the only time it would stop would be if I was talking to someone or in a group. So I went to every session they had. There were like 3 or 4 different sessions a day, and I'd go to every one and I'd sit in the group. And there was a voice, not the one that's yapping all the time, but there was another voice that told me what to say. And in a group, they would say, "Well, just say this." And so I'd say that. And pretty soon people are going, "You should be the doctor." Like, okay. And um, so I'd go to every session and the hard voice, the brutal voice would stop. But as soon as I came out, it would start again. So it was only when I was interacting with somebody or I was totally focused in the moment without thought, such as doing a jigsaw puzzle. And I like to do jigsaw puzzles. I always have. It's like for me, putting the world together. And some people don't like to do them. Some people don't even want to try to figure out how things fit together. But I always wanted to do that. And they can't. They can't even fit it together because there's a whole bunch of pieces that they won't look at. They just are so biased against it that those pieces they just put aside and said, "Well, I can't look at those. If I look at those, then I'm crazy. If I look at those, then I'm one of those weird religious people. If I look at those, I'm this or that. And I can't do that." And so there's a whole pile of pieces they won't look at. And, it's like people today won't look at the evidence of climate change or because they can't or whatever it is that works against what they're trained to trust on. They have to trust on what people tell them. And so they just won't look. And so, but I've always liked picking up all the pieces and looking at them. And it kind of was irrelevant to me if they were personally good or bad. I just wanted to know how it worked, kind of in an objective way. And so if I was just focusing on these jigsaw puzzles, then the voice would stop. But the moment that my attention wavered, I mean, totally focused, like, here's this piece, this color goes, so I have to find where this. And then when I finally saw the doctor, uh, the other voice is telling me what to tell the doctor. So the doctor's saying, I hear you hear voices. And I said, yeah, I do. Doesn't everybody? And he's like, well, and so he said, well, it would be odd for you to develop schizophrenia at this age anyway. He said, so, and I told him about the anxiety. He said, I think that you just had so much anxiety and so much stress over what's going on in your life that it just kind of put you over for a while. But you seem to be doing really good. So we'll just release you. You can go home. And there was a lady that I talked to the social worker one that talks to you about your history and what to do when you get out and all that. So I'm telling my story, but I'm not telling it. I'm just listening to this voice and it's telling me what to tell her. So I do. It's my story, but it's not the way I would tell it because I just wouldn't. It just, I would skip over things. So I'm telling her the story pretty soon. It's like, she's like, oh, you poor thing, and she just like, practically crying. And anyway, when that was over, about this time, the voice that's going on, and I'm feeling better now because I've had some sleep and I've had other people to talk to. I haven't not as much sleep, but a little bit. It says to me, well, you can do this and this will happen, or you can do that and that will happen. And then it says, or you could do this, and then you'll just, for the rest of your life, you'll just be going, I love you. I love you. That's all you'll be able to say. And I said, and I imagine myself sitting in some chair in a mental asylum as everybody walked by going, I love you, I love you. I said, oh, well, I guess I'll take that. The voice stopped. It just stopped dead. It was like the moment I surrendered and said, I'll take that. Since then, of course, that it didn't happen the way I imagined it. So since then, I think what it means is simply that what I already knew, that love is the answer to everything. And no matter what you say to someone, you're saying, I love you. It doesn't matter what you say because there's nothing else. It's just that it's said in many languages in many ways. Even if you're angry at somebody, it's just there. If love is all there is, it's always the same thing. So I imagine this whole process as if I was climbing a mountain, and there's other parts of it that I didn't tell you about because just adds on, but were very difficult. And it's as if I was climbing this mountain to get to the top. And the wind is blowing and the snow is blowing like on Mount Everest or Mount Denali. And I'm trying to get to the top. And I'm finally just barely crawling through the snow to the top. And I get to the top and I plant my flag and I give a sigh of relief because it stopped, and now I can come down. I got there. I crossed the dark river, rough river, and now I can come down. And I come down, and at that point, I'm not doing the decision anxiety. It's like I'm just present. But I'm also worried. Every time the voices would talk to me, I would start to shake because I was so afraid that it would start again. And so it took a couple weeks before I was completely back on flat ground, on grounded again. And they would wake me up in the middle of the night and start talking to me at 3 a.m. I don't think they keep a clock. I don't think they know what time it is. They'd wake me up at 2, 3 in the morning, and they'd be talking to me, the voices, people. They're actually people, had identities, told me who they were. And they would talk to me, and they were very kind, and they would amuse me. They would do things to make me laugh. They also told me things that were very, very profound. And they would always say, get your laptop, sit up, get your laptop, type up what we tell you. And I did. And so for a week or two, I was typing up all kinds of stuff, and it was very profound, and very helpful, and sometimes just amusing, just to amuse me and to make me feel better. And I did. And after a couple of weeks, everything was okay. And then I just went on and I heard voices still. But um, one day, a friend of mine or somebody I had met talked to me about using a pendulum. And the pendulum that she would use was a little bit heavy, but she used it. And she would just get a letter at a time. She would use a pendulum and a letterboard. What I decided to try it, and what I did was I got it's a very plastic light um, crystal here with dental floss. So it's very light, not hard to hold. I just hold it up and it moves. And so I could just say to you right now, would somebody move this pendulum and they will just move it? And would you make big circles so people can see it? And so I just hold it up. And yes, my arm is going to move a little bit just from the momentum of the pendulum because my hand is not resting on anything. I'm just holding it up. And can you go forward and back? And they could you go side to side, right to left? And this, let me try and hold it as steady as I can. But anyway, they can move it, and they join their energy with mine. And so as the pendulum moves, it pulls on my arm, of course. So that makes it move. But I'm not controlling what it's doing. I can ask them to do something, and they will do it, just as a demonstration. Um, so just swing it towards me. And you can get a pendulum like this and try it. But what happened for me was that for a few days it was fun. And it would spell out things on a letterboard, just a simple letterboard you print off the internet, half circle. And I was having fun, but I had to hold the pendulum with the right hand, and then I'd have to set it down and write what was said. And I'd have to remember. It was kind of tedious. I never thought of recording what I was saying then to say it aloud and record it. I didn't think of it at that time. Anyway, I did that for a couple days, and it was really interesting. Interesting. the detail and stuff. And then I went into a phase that I can only tell you was, again, very, very disturbing because I could not sleep and eat again because the voices were very loud and very present. I couldn't get away from it. I just couldn't get away from it. Whereas before it had kind of settled down to a nice uh, level. Could not get away from it unless I was very actively doing something and present or talking to someone. Otherwise, if I sat down to rest, if I sat down to eat, if I laid down to go to sleep, on and on and on. And even if I was working and doing something like on the internet or something, it would be talking. And it wasn't frightening talk or threatening talk. It was just loud and constant and would not stop. And I'm like, please stop, because I need a break. And it would not stop. And they tried to help me. There were voices that tried to help me because I think what was happening is, or at least in retrospect, they told me that what happened was my energy was already so high that when I added the pendulum to it, which tends to enhance your ability, it was like the floodgates were opened and the energy became so just poured through. And it was more than I could handle. And they couldn't really help me very much. But gradually, after a few days, it began to calm down. But that was a hard point, a very hard point. And it scared me off the pendulum. And it was another year before I picked it up. And I picked it up because I ran across it in a drawer somewhere, or actually one like it. And I don't like to be afraid of something because I like to face my fears and, get to reality. Because if love is everything, your fear is just a cloud in the way. And I don't like it to hold me back. So I picked up the pendulum and I tried it and I was kind of worried, but what I said, who is this talking to me? It said, this is love. And I said, okay, I'll talk to love. Um, and it was very kind. Um, and I just talked a little bit. And then the next day I did a little more and a little more. Pretty soon it became my go to feature because sometimes I would have a hard time picking up words they would tell me like the CON words, the con words, condominium, um, concert, concentration, condemnation. I would just have a little bit of trouble picking up what they were saying and some words like that word or spelling of names and things like that. And so I started using the pendulum more. And what I found, and we came to sort of a meeting of the minds, you might say, because they stopped bothering me in the middle of the night, except a few. And when I pick up the pendulum, then as Tobias, my friend in heaven, would say, everybody comes running, to see who can talk to you. So they say, Steph's picked up the pendulum. And they would come running to talk. So there was always someone. All I have to do is pick up the pendulum, and there will be somebody there to talk to me. Um, but they began to back off at other times. So it was like, okay, we have some regulation here now. It's like when Steph picks up the telephone, then we can talk to her. Otherwise, back off, everybody. And this was true except for a few. My friends Stephen, Thomas, Tobias, and a few others could still talk to me and would. Thomas and Steve mostly at night when I'm in bed or resting or laying or something. And others kind of held back until I picked up the pendulum. But because I'm closer to Steve and Thomas, our soul history is more entwined. Um, there's a lot more private talk that we have. And that doesn't necessarily happen on the pendulum, although it can. So the pendulum now has become my go to thing because I don't even have to focus. I don't have to worry about distractions, nothing. It's just like I can be eating and holding the pendulum. And I learned to turn on the recorder and say aloud what I'm hearing and what I'm reading. So I think of it kind of like a teletype. So I get to have a teletype at the same time as I am also picking up the words. Because it's telepathic, I don't hear nuances of tenor or anything. And they have said, well, that's because we don't have voice, we don't have vocal cords. we don't speak to you that way. We speak to you telepathically. And I can tell differences by the words they use. Some have certain words they use habitually, others, the manner in which they speak. I can pick up a difference. Tobias always calls me Steph. Hey, Steph, I want to talk to you about something. Or he always has a certain phrase he will use to begin. Um, Thomas calls me Stephanie, I think, most of the time. But anyway, it's just the way they say it that I can kind of pick up the differences or words that they will use when they're talking to me and certain phrases that they will use. So I can kind of distinguish between them. But for a long time, it was a rule that the minute I picked up the pendulum, they had to say, this is so and so, this is so and so. And they could not lie about who it was. And a couple tried and got in trouble from the rest because they did that. So through this process of, it's now been 8 years, 2015, 9 years since I have been in daily conversation with those heaven side. And so most recently, let me give you a demonstration of the pendulum, how I use it. Now, I'm telling you all of this because I want you to understand that just because you hear voices does not mean that you're a danger to yourself or others, or that you can't function in a very credible way, or that you can't be very productive and very creative in your life, because am that. So I'm going to set this down and try to show you the pendulum and how it works. So here I go with this cheap pendulum. And my kitty is here, my little kitty, to try and be comfortable. No, you don't get to play with the pendulum. Okay. So who is here to talk to you? Riemann is here. Oh, Mr. Riemann. I would like to say something to everybody because my name is not known to a lot of you because you have not engaged in the kind of research and activity that amuses me and engages Stephanie, because she also has a very clear ability to use logic, you see. So my name is Bernard Riemann, and I had a lifetime in the 19th century. I've also had one in the 20th century, but I'm dead now, as you would think of it. I'm in heaven after my most recent lifetime. In the 19th century, I was a mathematician, and some of my work is still studied by those who engage in a quest for understanding of how the universe operates, because mathematics is the language of the universe. And Stephanie understands this very well. She was known to me in my lifetime in the 20th century, actually, because we've had many lifetimes together. And although she did not know of my past history with her, or even my past, she knew that there was something that was important in our relationship. Okay, Mr. Riemann, I have to stop here and say this is true because I had him as a teacher when I was young in school. And I remembered his name from this lifetime. He's the only teacher whose name I remembered because he was my best teacher. Anyway, I just thought throw that in. So I wasn't expecting Mr. Riemann because I haven't talked to him in a while. But do you want to add something? Yes, I do, of course. What I want to say is that if you would listen today to what we have to say, you wouldn't be so afraid of us. You wouldn't be so afraid when we come to you and talk to you. You would say, well, there's Mr. Riemann today, and he has something to say. In my connection with Stephanie, we discussed some of my hypotheses that were created through my study of the numbers, you see, and how they reflected on reality, because I have been a mathematician in many, many, many lifetimes and a musician as well. And I swell with pride when I think that I can explain to her from here so much of my understanding of reality. And she can pick right up on it, you see, and understand what I'm trying to tell her. Stephanie is not particularly well versed in the mathematical language. She did not study it beyond high school, and that is to her advantage, you see, because she's not limited in her ability to comprehend the fundamental questions that are presented by the way the numbers function together and apart, you see, because there's a part of the mathematical language that will help people to start a new understanding of how God energy interacts to create the world you see. And so Steph has been willing to sit with for hours with me as I explain this to her. And we have had the calculator out while I give her numbers that she can play with. And this is the way that I like to play. I like being able to talk to people on earth. So you might say I'm one of the voices that she hears. And she's hearing me right now. And she's just repeating what I say. Or rather, she's letting it play through her vocal cords, you see. And so she can hear it, and she can speak it, and she can watch the pendulum move. And therefore, she doesn't even have to worry. She can sit here and pet the cat and let me talk to her and keep one eye on the pendulum as it moves. And that is where it's at. And so I just wanted to say to those of you who hear voices, it's time to play in a different way. It's time to face the darkness you see and come to understand reality. And Steph has a lot of experience in this, and she's been talking to us here, not necessarily me, but Minnie, for the last 9 years every day. And she records it, and she does say, I'll pass this on if you ask me to, so others can listen too. And they do. They listen and they walk away and they say, well, it has nothing to do with me today. That has nothing to do with me today, but it has everything to do with you because you see, you are the ones who will be the trust on a very, very dark path if you don't learn your math, because the math is the language of the universe, and there are many secrets revealed to those who pay attention, you see. Thank you for listening to me. I wanted to be the one who had a chance to relieve my anxiety about talking to humanity because, as Steph says, most of humanity refuses to look at the pieces or pick them up off the floor in order to forget, in order to complete the puzzle. You see, they will not do what I ask them to, which is to open up your casket, you see, the in, get out, and shout and say, I'm alive today. Because many of you are the walking dead, because you are dead to reality. And as she says, you do not understand that those people who hear voices are hearing from the spirits of those who once walked among you. And they need to be appreciated, you see, because they have a special talent. However, they are treated as if they are crazy. And that means you are the crazy one if you think that way. If you think that the people who have schizophrenia are crazy, then you're the crazy one. They're the courageous ones because they're here to change history. They're here to learn to play in a different way. And so I know that Steph is going to end this interview at this time because it's gone on for a while. But stay tuned because she has a lot to tell you, and so do we. We have a lot to share with you if you would just listen and take it in and not be afraid of what you don't understand. Because what you don't understand is that we stand here waiting for you to open your ears and listen to us and not run away in fear. Because the fears of the ones who consider themselves dear to the ones who are diagnosed with schizophrenia are fueling their anxiety. It's time to stop it at its root. It's time to find the square root of reality and come back home to God, you see. Thank you, Mr. Riemann. And he's right. I will end this particular session now and just let you say hi to Sammy. Sammy's our new little kitty, and he's finally getting adjusted. We've probably had him a week, and he is liking my lap a lot. He'll come and lay here and go to sleep. So he's finally getting comfortable with us, me and my son, whereas he didn't really before. So, all of you who hear voices out there, there's a lot of people who want to hear voices and they can't. So, those of you who hear voices and are running scared, let's talk about it because I have a lot to say about it. And there are others who have a lot to say about it too. I will talk to you soon and thank you for tuning in.